Welcome to Interact Learn by Doing Season 2 Project 2, which is a follow-up course from Project 1 where I taught you how to create the Lego blocks of an audiovisual, but it didn't occur to me that not everyone knows how to do the programming that's necessary to piece the Lego blocks together to create a much more advanced audiovisual. So that's what we'll be doing in this course. Okay, so why don't we get started with the Ableton Live side of things. I've gone ahead and created a basic composition, and you should do the same so that you can follow this video. Now it sounds something like this. So as you can hear, it has 3 different parts: an intro, a main thing, and an outro. And as you can see on the left, I already have OSC configured, and I just have the MaxForLive device in the kick drum, the percussion, and the bass guitar. And you can download this in the Patreon post section of this video. And so basically it gives you a field for an IP address, port number, as well as the message address that you can change. And you can see all over here when it comes into protocol. The purpose of this chapter is we're going to send something from Ableton to Unreal so that in Unreal we know which part of the composition we are in. So the best way I found to do this is with an empty MIDI track. And at the beginning of every section, I have a MIDI clip where I just put the lowest note, which is 0 here. And the second one here goes to 1. And the third part, we have 2. And you can even see it here in this part. It says 0. And then when we get to part 2 or part 1, we have parts somewhere in here. So we can see that over there. And then here, when we start the last section, we go to 2. And we use this variable or this value to change up the effects based on the part that we are in the composition. And of course, in the MIDI here, I have the same device. This is V2. It sends basically the MIDI key. So if I just press something here, you can see that we get the value and it's sent here as well. For the MIDI clips, for the length, I make it as long as I'm going to play the section. Let's just say 4 bars, and then I'll add in 1 or 2 bars extra so that it doesn't re-trigger. And yeah, I just have it 5 here. And over on Unreal, we'll use this value to change up some parameters of some blueprints that we created in Season 2, Project 1, so that we can differentiate, different sections of the music. So that's what we'll be doing next. Okay, so for the Unreal project, what we'll do is we will duplicate the project file from the previous course as a starting point for Project 2. Now, I know there are people that have only seen the free video. I'll make sure that we only use the blueprints that we created in that chapter so that you can follow this specific chapter as well. So let's go ahead and take this folder, and we're just going to duplicate it like that. And then we will call this P2 instead. Let's copy that and then go in here and paste it in. And we should delete these so that we can regenerate it. And let's go ahead and open. Okay, so now that it's open, we just dismiss this plugin message. And as usual, we will disable real time while we're editing. And because we deleted the config, we need to reset our editor preferences. And for me, I like to do the asset editor open location to main window as usual. And that's fine, so we can exit. And let's go over to the blueprints that we created for chapter 1. And that's going to be the BP AnimViz 1 as well as BP OSC T1. And what we'll do is to basically create a new template for this one, but with the functionality that it saves the state of the composition. So the part that we just talked about. Okay, to begin with, let's finish up the OSC updates that we need to get the part. So we just duplicate our template. So it's going to be T1. So duplicate that, just call it like PRT and then _1. Okay, and let's enter this. And we disconnect this one here, but we get rid of the string. We don't have any strings, so we can get rid of this function. But this int one gives us the key of the MIDI value. So we'll use this to save the part of the composition. So let's change the list of the switch on strings. So we have kick, yes, but we now have a perk instead and a bass. And then we added a new one, and this is going to be the part. So the part, we want to move it up like this so that it's on the very top. And we get this, and we want to save the values. So we will promote to variable, and we'll call this one like a current part. And we get the part. And what we basically do with this is that when we trigger any of these, we will probably pass it as a value through a function, and that changes what we see in the effect. So basically that's it on this side. So we can just compile and save. Okay, let's get started with our BP AnimViz 1. So let's click on this, and we'll be changing a lot of things. First of all, let's get rid of this one. And if you remember, we had a moment where we had to keep connecting and disconnecting. We don't want to do that. So in order to be able to turn this on and off in the world outliner, what we'll do is we'll create a new branch and a new variable. So let's promote this and call this edit mode. So by default, if we compile, it should be false. And if it's false, we set it to 0 because we want to set this kind of in a performance mode. So it's fine. But if it's not, we'll be able to see meshes rather than having set to 0. So that's that. And then we need a sequence. So click on S, and then we'll plug this into the second one. And okay, so here, instead of setting a material, we'll create a new material that is going to be a dynamic material instance. So we'll do that next. Let's go into our content. Let's create a new folder, Control-Shift-N, and we call this mat. And enter. Let's right click to create a new material. Let's call this one AnimViz. That's fine. 1. Enter. And for this one, what we want to do is to be able to set our own colors. So click 3 and click convert to parameter. We call this one color. Okay, and then we just connect this into the base color, and let's give it a default color of just white, or actually let's just do like a red. That's fine. And then for the emission, hold M and click. I will take the color, and then this value here is going to be a single constant, but a parameter. And let's call this one emission. Okay, and then we just do that. So for single value, you just hold 1 and click. Okay, and then we take this and we put it into the emissive color. So when we change the values, let's just say like 1, we'll see some glowing here. Like that. Great. Just set it back to 0, and this is ready. So just save, and then in our mesh, in the blueprint, we have a sphere. Set edit mode to true for now. Okay, compile. Let's change the sphere to a cube. So we just type in cube. And I think it might be this one. Yeah. And then for the material, we will get rid of the engine content so that we can see our own material, just this one. Great. Now in the construction script, what we'll do is, let's just rename this to mesh. Take the mesh, and we will create a dynamic material instance. So if you didn't know and are new to my channel, by default, obviously in Unreal, if you assign a material, you're not able to change the parameters of a material in real time. You need to create an instance, which is dynamically changeable, and that's what we're doing here. So let's connect this one here, and our source material is going to be this one here. Okay, and then we need to save this. So we will promote to variable, and let's just call it mat reference. REF, that's fine. And then in here, we want to set the starting color. So that's going to be called the set vector parameter value. Okay, and if you remember, our parameter name is color. And let's just give it a new variable. Let's just call it start color, or just color, I think. Okay, and this one we want to be able to edit in the levels. So we obviously set the public, and also we need to set this edit mode to public as well. And let's compile to give it a default value of, whatever, that's fine, right? And that's looking good. Okay, so we can just compile and save. Let's go into our event graph. Now that we have finished the initial updates that we need to do, we will create a bunch of new functions in the event graph. So we'll do that next. Okay, let's begin with the materials, which is going to be the simplest part. And if you remember, we created the dynamic material instance in the construction script, and we also have the reference down here. So what I want to do is to be able to set the color before we run all of this animation here. And so that's going to be before. So I want to create a new function here. So let's go ahead and create a new function. Let's do set part color. Okay, and when we set part color, what we need to get the reference. It's going to be very similar, and we do a set vector parameter value, and then name is color. And what I want to do is to be able to set the value from a variable that's accessible outside. So I will duplicate this, and to make it less confusing, this is actually going to be the start color. And then this is going to be the part colors, because it's going to be an array. So we go here and click on array, right? And because this is an array, what we need to do is put in a for each loop. So we take this and we do a for each loop, connect this up here, and then the individual elements, they come out of here, and we just plug that into here. Okay, so we just do that and make sure that we don't have any crossing wires. So that's looking good. So we can just do that. Let's compile, and then, okay, this, we should just compile one more time. Okay, let's go back and drop in to here, and it gets connected. So that's great. Only thing to do is to add in some initial values. So we have 3 parts, so we add in 3 elements, and let's just say the first one is going to be, let's just say some kind of blue. And then when we get to the second part, we go to some kind of turquoise. And at the end, we maybe go to a bit of purple. Anything that you like is all good. And so that's set up, so we can just compile and save. And then we go to the next part, which are going to be the scale and the rotation, as well as the emission. Okay, next up, we're going to work on the emission, and we'll be running that off of the Anim1 timeline, which is a 0, 1, 0 kind of ramp up and ramp down keyframe, which works for the emission and the scale, but we can take this out for now. And what we'll do is we'll create a new function. So let's call this one lerp part color. Okay, and for this one, we'll need to get the alpha. So we do alpha for the input, which is going to be of type float. And then we don't need an output. But what we'll do is we'll use a simple float lerp, but connect this here. And for the emission, we always know that it will always start from 0. So we can keep the A as 0, but the target, we need a target. So what should we do? Well, I think we should be able to set a different emission value for each part. And we also need an array for that. So we'll create a new float array, and that's going to be the emission target, let's just say, and of type float. And this will also be public. And let's just compile. Okay, and let's just say we add 3, And let's say the first part, we have a very low emission of 0.5. And then for the main part, we go up to 4. And then at the end, we go to 1. Okay. And we just bring this array in. And for this, we only need to get a single element of the array based on the part value that comes in from OSC, right? And so we do a get a copy. Okay, and we plug this into the B, which is the target. And where do we get this integer? Well, what we'll do is we will create a new variable. And let's just say current part for this integer. And we'll move this up. And this, we need to get it from the trigger. And so what we'll do is we'll create a new input. So click on that, and let's just say part. When we get the part from OSC, we plug this current part into here. Sorry, this should be of type integer, and this should work. Okay, when we get the part, let's just say we are now at part 1. We go into this function. We'll get basically element 1 from this array, and then that's the new target. Okay, and so we get that, and now we get the material. And then this is going to be, instead of a vector, we set a scalar parameter. Okay, and if you remember the name, it should be emission. And we take the value into here. Okay, that should look okay. And we can go to the event graph and then take this function and drop it in and just connect the alpha into here. And so for the material, this is done. So then we move on to the scale and the rotation. Okay, now for the scale, we'll be using the same timeline as the scale animation starts from 0, ramps to 1, and ends at 0. So we will put a function next to the color. So let's make some space here and create a new function. We'll call this one lerp part scale. Okay, lerp part scale. This will also need an array for the target scale. So we will click on that, and then we'll call this one scale target. Okay, and this should be public. And this is going to be of type vector. So we'll be doing a non-uniform scale. And once again, we take this, and then based on the current part, we get a single element from the array. So we do get a copy, and we click that in there. And then this, we will do a lerp vector. And this is not A because we know it's 0. So we do it in the target, and the alpha, just put that into here. And then for the scale, we get the mesh. And then the mesh, we do a set relative scale 3D. Just going to make sure that, yep, that's fine. So connect that here and bring that into here. So, very simple for this one. Let's make some space here. Okay, let's go to the event graph, and let's drop in the scale into here. And we take the alpha and make sure that things are looking tidy. So that should be done for this timeline. And so next up is going to be the rotation. So compile and save. Okay, for the rotation, we'll create a new timeline that just goes from 0 to 1 instead of ramping down in the anim1. So then we can just duplicate this. Let's name this anim2. And in order to trigger these two at the same time, we can't chain them together. So we will use a sequence. So hold down S and click. And we'll do this and this here. Now for anim2, get rid of these. The last one is going to be 1. And then let's just select these two, and we'll make this one auto. And what I want to do is flatten this and then fast ramp up and then slow down. So that's fine. And so here is where we'll put the rotation, and that's going to be another function. So let's create a new function, lerp part rot. Okay, and for this one, unlike the emission and the scale where we only need to set the target, for this one, we need to also get the initial as well as the target. So let's create a new variable. Now this one's going to be the rotation or rot initial and of type rotator. This is also going to be exposed, so click on that. And then let's just duplicate this one and we do rot target. Okay, the initial values we actually didn't set on the scale. We can just do that later. We take the initial and we take the target. And then like the other ones, we do get a copy. And let's just duplicate this one. And the index is going to be the part number. So that's going to be here. Get, and then we can connect these up together. And we will use a lerp rotator. I will use the shortest path and we'll take A as the initial, B as a target, and the alpha, let's just plug that into here to get the input. And then when we get that, we want to set the mesh here. Take this, and then we will do set its relative rotation. And let's connect this up here and here. Okay, that's looking fine. So let's go into the event graph. We take this function, drop it in, and connect the alpha. Okay, so code-wise, we're pretty much done with this blueprint, so we can just compile and save. And actually, one more thing before we go to the next part, we want to set the initial values for these variables. So the scale, let's add in 3. Let's say for the first one, we just keep it simple. So it goes from 0 to 1. And then for the second one, let's just say we do 1, 1, and 2. And I don't know, let's do like 1.5, 1, 1. We'll see how it looks at the end. Let's get the rotation. Add 3. We can start with this one on the x-axis. Yeah. I think I'll just change the x-axis. So the initial, we can start from 0, and then maybe the other ones we start from 45, and then this one's like 120 or whatever. And the target, let's do this, and then this one is like 90. This one is 0, and this one is like 270, right? These are just initial values that can be changed outside, so that is set up, okay? So we can just compile and save and test all the code that we just made in the level. Okay, so I'll take back what I just said. Obviously, we need to do a bit more blueprints because we made all this, but it doesn't get triggered because we didn't add anything in the OSC blueprint. So let's just keep this as is, as a template, but rather we will just duplicate it. So Control D, and we can just call this one A1. And let's enter. And for this one, we need the reference to the BP AnimViz. So we need a new variable that's going to be an array. So get an array, and it's going to be of type AnimViz object reference, and let's name it BP AnimViz S because it's plural. So we get that, and then this needs to be exposed in the levels. So click on that. And so what we do is basically for each of our kick, percussion, and bass, we will assign an index within the array. So we just do a get. Okay, and then we need to duplicate this 2 more times. Let's line these up. And so what I figured is that kick, percussion, bass. Actually, I want to move this percussion to the middle. No, the bass to the middle. So let's just move this here. And so we do 0, 1, and 2. And so 0 gets the kick, 1 is the bass, and the percussion is 2, okay? So when we do this, we need to trigger the animation. So when this goes, it goes here, and we need to pass in the part, and so this is where we have this. Let's connect all of these up. It's going to take a little bit of time. Okay, once you're done with that, we'll take this current part variable and we will plug this into each of them. Just like that. Okay, so this is now ready, so we can just compile and save. And next up, we need to change some things in the level so that we can test it. Now for the changes to our level, we won't be needing this one here because this is the old one, so delete that. We will drag in the new one into the level, zero this out, and here we have the variable that we just created, so we need to add 3 elements of the 3 that we have here. So we can use this eyedropper tool. Now for 0, it should be the kick, so we'll take this one here, and then the middle, I want to use the bass. And then the right one is just going to be the percussion. So now we have the references assigned. We will go into each of these and set our custom parameters. So let's go to our kick drum, which is here. And for this material, okay, we need to get rid of this. So let's go back and we will get rid of this material variable, delete that. Let's compile and save. Go back. Now we should set the initial color, which is the start color. Let's just say this one is, you know what? All white is fine. So let's go in and change this all to white. Okay, and for the part colors, let's go into the colors. Now we have all of these here, but what we can do is differentiate them. So for the kick, we can maybe slightly change to like this, and then that is over here, and really whatever you like. And the percussion or the bass, let's go into this territory, or maybe here, and here, maybe reddish, and yeah, that's fine. Okay, and the emission target, okay, so we can keep the emission target as is. The scale for the middle one, I really do want to increase the Z scale. So instead of 2, we can set it to a 4. And that's looking okay. The rotation initial, it's fine. Maybe for the center one, we will keep this 0 and like 180. So basically, for each of these instances, you're going to be able to change the scale and the rotation and the emission for each part. Okay, and that's looking okay. So what I want to do is do a little bit of setup on the scene. And instead of facing down, I want to pilot the camera and face towards the x-axis. So I'm just going to move this, go down here like that. And so let's get a nice value going. So click on that. We will do 0 here and maybe 0 here as well. And 0 in Y and maybe 80 in Z. And this one minus 1,500. And from here, what I suggest is that you go and do some slight tweaking and set up your own little scene. I'm going to do the same, and I'll see you when you're done with that. Okay, so this is what I have. I didn't spend too much time on it, just some walls, some, lighting here. And if you see a huge amount of noise in your shadows, that's because of the screen space global illumination that we set in the previous course towards the end. Now, screen space GI works well for well-lit scenes, but not so well for dark scenes like this. So I suggest that you go into the project settings, type global, and switch it back to lumen, and that will also automatically change the shadows to lumen as well. Okay, and for the blueprints, I went ahead and put a huge amount of values. It's really your creative choice. And also one more thing was that I changed the speed here. Now, to make it easier to edit outside, why don't we create a new variable? So do that, and we do anim speed. And right. Because I'm changing the speed only on 1, but not anim2, we should also add this. That's also my mistake. So get anim2, and let's put that here. And this float needs to be exposed, so do that, compile and save. And so if we go back here, select all of them, we should set it to 2 instead of 3, okay? And so in order to test this, we want to disable the edit mode so that we don't see it during editing, and we can save this over in Ableton. Usually what I do is I have a MIDI controller which maps to these here to trigger the different clips for each different section of the music. But right now I don't have that set up. And so I don't really want to be switching between Ableton and Unreal while I'm testing this. So I have recorded the MIDI and put it in the linear view so that, you know, we have some time here to start and then get over to Unreal and see what it looks like. So that's it for the chapter 1. And of course, there are many more different techniques to put those Lego blocks together to create a much more complex audiovisual effect. Now, if you want to learn more of those techniques covered in the rest of the course, visit ntrct.live and take not only this course, but the 4 other courses available at this time. I hope to see you there.